I've not done that many reaction videos on this channel, but I've had people suggest that I do more of them. So I feel like this is the perfect opportunity because Linus Tech Tips released another video that's about Linux gaming and more specifically about SteamOS. So let's check it out.
There's so many rumors swirling around Valve lately. A new Steam controller in mass production, Steam Link on Raspberry Pi 5, cool. New branding guidelines suggesting powered by SteamOS consoles? Is that for handhelds like this one from Lenovo? Or is it for the return of Steam Machine game consoles?
Why can't we have both? That would be great, actually. I think it's more about the handheld, but the Steam Machines coming back would be very cool too.
Either way, it really looks like Valve is ramping up to make a serious challenge to Microsoft's desktop dominance.
I don't think at all that that's what's happening. Both the examples they said that could be, the Steam Machine consoles or the Steam Deck competitors. I think that there is likely that those could be happening. I don't think they're trying for the desktop at all. Maybe at some point, but based on the current indicators, I don't think that that's coming anytime soon. But I could be wrong about that.
And I sure hope they do. Some of you probably remember that Valve's SteamOS started as a response to the threat of Microsoft creating a walled garden with Windows 8. A threat that not only hasn't gone away, but might be even greater than ever with the consolidation of the Xbox and Windows stores.
I didn't know that there was the consolidation of that, so that does seem even worse. But also with Windows Recall and a lot of the other stuff that Microsoft is doing, the decision that Valve made to get away from Windows as much as possible and to not have all their eggs in one basket was a good decision. They also started doing Mac gaming as well, but Linux is clearly the better experience for that. But yeah, so good job, Valve, for making that decision.
There's only one small problem. As good as SteamOS is, delivering a console-like gaming experience for thousands of PC games.
Look at that number right there. 17,000 games are available to be played, verified, or playable. There are games that also are not necessarily labeled yet that still could work, but we already had 17,000 games. I remember when we had 17 games. So this is awesome. But yeah, let's get back to the video.
Even ones that were only ever intended to run on Windows, Valve still hasn't made a version that's designed for me to put on my...
I mean, most of them at this point are only made to work on Windows.
...custom PC. Or have they? As it turns out, Valve has been working away in the background, preparing SteamOS for its promised official wide release.
I don't know if they actually promised anything. I know that there's some engineers who said that that's the plan, but I don't think they officially announced any plan to or promise to actually do a full wide release of a system. So I don't know if that's actually true, but I don't feel like they did because I think I would have remembered that. But it's possible I could be wrong. But I don't think they officially said they're going to make I know they said that they were considering it in the beginning, but that was many years ago.
I think now is as good a time as any to see what the experience is like if you download SteamOS and throw it on your PC. It's also a good time to learn about our sponsor, Amazon Luna. Whether you're on the go or on the couch, before you type that comment, yes, I know I don't need to wait for SteamOS to be a Linux gamer.
That's good that he did acknowledge that this is unnecessary, whatever they're doing. I have a feeling because it says I can't keep waiting for SteamOS, and they're constantly talking about SteamOS, and they basically said in the intro they're going to be putting it on something else. So I feel like they're going to be taking like an existing system and trying to put SteamOS on it. That's not really what it's for. So I think this is just for like the experimentation aspect of it. Most people would have no reason to do this, especially with like Chimera or Bazite even. Bazite even more so because it's easier to install. But yeah.
But in spite of what your friendly neighborhood neckbeard may claim, most Linux distros still involve a lot of manual faffing about to get things working. And if Linux gaming is tricky for me, your little cousin Joey Mainstream is going to be screwed.
Okay, so first, depends on what you mean by most. So if you mean there are a ton of different options and most of them have issues like that, I could see why you could say that. So for example, all the arch derivatives or all the like the OpenSUSE stuff and any derivative of those. Most of the Fedora derivatives, not all of them, but most of them, sure. I would say that all the hardcore stuff like Gentoo and Slackware, sure, there's a lot of messing around with that needed, but most is only in the technical sense. There are distributions you do not have to do that. So if you want to have just a regular desktop experience, you get something that's Ubuntu based, so Ubuntu or something based on Ubuntu, and you're pretty much going to have a good experience, like Linux Mint or Zorin or one of the flavors like Kubuntu or whatever. There's tons of great options. Ubuntu Budgie is a good option. I don't think that you're really going to have an issue because you can just install those distros, then install Steam, then install the game. You may have to turn on the Proton support, but that's about as far as you need to do in terms of most games. So I don't really agree that you need to faff about with stuff. If you're talking about turning on Proton as faffing about, I would have to disagree because the amount of stuff you have to do in Windows there's a significant amount of things that you have to do in Windows. So I don't think that that's the same thing. But that's pretty much where it stops. Unless you're talking about the majority of distributions, as in there are tons of ones that are not made for everyday users, and actually most of them are not made for everyday users. So yes, but if you stick to the ones that are, you would be fine. And Joey Mainstream would be fine too.
That is why we need SteamOS. Projects like Holo ISO, Chimera, Bazzite, and the other one that you're furiously typing in the comments right now are glimpses.
Okay, first of all, you're talking about Chimera and Bazzite. I don't know if it's Bazzite or Bazzite. I just say Bazzite. And both of those are fine for a console system. That's what they're for. That's what their actual intent is. So you can build your own console using something that is somewhat SteamOS, but not exactly SteamOS because SteamOS is made for the Steam Deck. But you don't need to do any of that stuff. You could just use Ubuntu base. Although I just want a quick note, this whole Debian thing, you're doing this obviously as a joke, but this is also a joke distro. It was made like one release just for the sake of making it because it was making fun of other random distros that were being made at the time. I don't think they made any more than one. I'm pretty sure it was just one. And also, even the name of it is a joke because Debian was not based on Debian. It was just named that for an additional joke. So
are glimpses at a beautiful penguin-powered future that could be, but the fact of the matter is that barring some kind of earth-shaking change, when regular people make the great penguin migration, it's going to be on a steam-powered train.
I don't think that's true. I think there are some people who would wait for Valve. It's an interesting point because people are going to be more comfortable with Valve because they've heard of Valve, and having a platform that is made by Valve is enticing for people who don't know anything else about the platform. So, I understand why people would want to wait for that, but the majority of people don't need to and don't really have a reason to wait. You don't need SteamOS to have Steam on Linux. In fact, you don't need SteamOS to even do the same kind of thing for Steam Deck type of stuff. So if you put Bazzite on something like the Legion Go or whatever it's called, you'd have a very similar experience than having actual SteamOS. You just wouldn't have Valve support, but for the most part, you still have a good experience. So I don't think that that's actually an accurate statement because, sure, a lot of people would wait. Although now that I think about it, I probably would still use SteamOS if it was made for everyday use because it's actually a good design concept. The whole A/B system with the Arch base, but not the Arch speed of updates. There's potential there, so I still might use it. He might be right in that sense, too.
As we're filming this, there are two ways for a non-developer to get SteamOS 3. Option 1, buy a Steam Deck. Easy, but you're stuck with the Steam Deck. Option 2.
That's as if that's a problem. What? Steam Deck's awesome. What are you talking about? Even the new, the OLED Steam Deck is even better. Yeah, oh no, you're stuck with a functioning good computer that you can plug into your monitor or your TV and have a good gaming experience as a console, because that's basically what it is. Oh no.
Download the Steam Deck recovery image, flash that to a USB key, and install it on compatible hardware. Valve is committed to making a proper installer before the full release, but...
Are they? I mean, I'm not even sure. Obviously, they would make a real installer if it was a full release system, but are they actually making a full? I don't think there's any, like, there's rumors about it, and engineers have talked about it in the past many years ago, but I don't think that there's an actual plan necessarily that's been announced. So I don't think they're committed to anything at this point.
That's the way you do it now. Less easy. And it doesn't help that at the time of filming, Googling install SteamOS actually leads you to the build your own Steam machine page for the old Debian-based SteamOS 2 from like a decade ago.
That's a problem. Yeah, that's a problem because that page should not exist. And if it does need to exist for, archiving purposes, great, do that. But like put a label that says it's archived or read only or don't do this or warning, this is not what you're looking for. Something like that. Or just don't let them download the old version because there's no value in the old version because it hasn't been touched in a very long time. I think it said, Debian 8. So very old because we're currently on Debian 12 and we're about to get Debian 13. And for those who don't know, Debian releases once every 2 to 3 years. So yeah, it's been a while. And no, you should not use this. But they should have like a giant warning.
That's kind of rough for Joey. Though, to Valve's credit, at least it links to the page for the Steam Deck recovery image. So I think we can figure it out.
Okay, so it's good that they have a link to it, but also that notice should not be at like halfway point of the page. It should be at the very top, or this page just not exist. I guess they don't want to lose the SEO of it, but at the same time, it's giving bad signals to people who think that they can download SteamOS when they really can't. And even the recovery image is made for the Steam Deck. It's not an actual ISO you can put on anything. It's made specifically for that hardware, at least at the moment. Maybe at some point they'll do something else, but I feel like it's more manufacturer type of stuff that would be likely.
We used Rufus to image it to a USB drive, booted the live image, picked this option to re-image our Steam Deck. Then we basked in this glorious wall of fast-scrolling text, and that's it. We've installed SteamOS on our hardware for a total cost of $0. Take that, Microsoft, and thanks, Gaben. But does it work?
Well, first of all, you probably didn't spend $0 because you had to have specific hardware that fit this criteria of AMD and everything that requires for the Steam Deck to function. So it's probably not $0. But anyway, still cool. It's cool that they're doing this because I wouldn't be doing this. I wouldn't be trying this, even though I have hardware mostly that was compatible. So maybe at some point I will, but it requires, I think, a NVMe that I don't have. So, or at least not a spare one. So I probably won't do that. But at the same time, it'd be cool to play with it. So I guess in a way, this is good that I don't have to do that and I can get the benefit of watching this video.
The thing is, we won't know until we reboot, because everything that you've seen so far can be done even on unsupported hardware. What do you mean, unsupported, Linus? Linux supports, everything, doesn't it? Well, yes, but also no. Linux is an umbrella term that we use to describe many distinct computing experiences, and it's up to the maintainer.
It's not technically yes and no. It's no, it doesn't support literally everything because there's tons of computer hardware out there and there's no way to support everything because some things are made for a specific type of function and have exclusive hardware and exclusive software for it and stuff like that. So I wouldn't say everything, but that's more like being nitpicky on the terminology. But yeah, it supports a lot of stuff depending on the distribution and the deployment of it because it's more complicated than that. That's true.
Maintainer of the Linux distribution to decide what it does and doesn't do out of the box. And as you'd imagine, the Steam Deck recovery image is developed for, well, the Steam Deck first and foremost, which results in some key hardware requirements. The big two being a discrete AMD GPU and an NVMe boot drive to install to. Also, this is fun. During the setup process, there is not any kind of prompt for which drive or which partition you'd like to install to. It just assumes that you want to totally overwrite the drive of your Steam Deck, so consider yourself warned.
It's good that they have a warning there but also it makes sense that it would not give you the option because it's made for the Steam Deck, which only has the ability to wipe the Steam Deck. So that makes sense. But yeah, that's a good warning.
While I'm throwing out warnings, there's also limited firmware included. Support for Marvell network cards, for example, is mostly missing, and there are some special requirements around sleep modes. The TLDR, though, is basically use the hardware that you can find that is most similar to a Steam Deck if you want to try this for yourself right now.
Or use Bazite and skip all of these problems. Yeah, all of them. All of these problems can be skipped by just using Bazite.
600G on an Asus Prime B550MA motherboard with 16 gigs of DDR4 memory from G.Skill. That's a big Steam Deck. Now, we did notice some mentions of NVIDIA in recent SteamOS patch notes, so we did try installing with an RTX 3060 GPU, but while we were able to boot the USB drive and we were able to clone the image to the NVMe drive, we were not able to continue with the setup process and instead got this garbled screen. Our mission today does not include troubleshooting drivers or the Linux boot process. I don't care if you think it's easy, Joey doesn't.
Okay, so that's fair. You shouldn't be trying to do that sort of stuff in terms of like most people don't want to do that sort of thing. So, or even know what you're talking about, troubleshooting drivers, So I feel like this is a totally fine perspective to go along. And the NVIDIA support is just started. And in fact, because SteamOS is Wayland focused, it's not even really been a long time that you could support NVIDIA. That's only been, as of last year, a viable option because NVIDIA introduced, I think in the middle of last year, some support for Wayland that was people have been waiting for NVIDIA to finally start supporting. Not because they just wanted to do their support differently, which was then just exclusive to them, and no one agreed with that. So eventually, after years of arguing, NVIDIA finally gave in and gave support for the universal stuff. And that's why we now have NVIDIA stuff being put into the SteamOS. But that's also super early days. There's no way that's going to work yet. Maybe it'll work at some point in the future, like maybe this year. It'll definitely work in the future at some point. But right now, definitely not. But also he said about how you don't want to do drivers and deal with that sort of thing. And that's completely fair. I agree with what he's saying here. Most people do not want to deal with the drivers. As a person who's used Linux for years and years and years and has made a podcast and about a show about the news for Linux and open source, This Week in Linux, if you haven't heard it. And even for me, I don't want to deal with the drivers if I don't have to. Sure, if I have to, I'll deal with stuff. But if I don't have to, I don't want to because I just want to get things done. So I think most people are like that.
We listened to Valve and switched back to a Radeon RX 7600, where we had a much better time getting through the actually refreshingly simple setup. Pick a language, pick a time zone, pick a network, and let it do its thing. Now, I don't know why I get a battery low warning on a desktop.
Because it's assuming that you are using the Steam Deck, and I would assume that it's giving you this message because it can't find a battery at all. And because it can't find it, it's giving you like just a warning that it's not there. Please keep your device plugged in. Yeah, it's just basically saying it can't find it. That's what I assume. I don't know. I guess it's probably because the SteamOS recovery image is made for the Steam Deck. It's assuming that if it can't find it, it's just low and not that it doesn't exist. And that's why it's showing the error.
In the grand scheme of things, that's a pretty small issue, and a few minutes later, we can sign in either with our username and password or via the Steam mobile app. After a quick scroll and click, we're off to the races in game mode. Now, you've probably all seen the Steam Deck interface at this point. Cosmetically, it's basically desktop big picture, but Valve tries to squeeze out a little bit of extra horsepower by running it on the lighter weight GameScope microcompositor instead of in the full desktop environment that we'll look at in just a moment.
So GameScope is really cool. It's got a lot of benefits for performance, but it's not just that. It's also got some benefits of like console experience. When you plug stuff in, it just knows what to do with it. And so it's more than just like an optimization feature and like a microcompositor. But it is also that too, and it is very cool. But also it's available on Bazite and I'm pretty sure Chimera OS too. So you could just use those instead.
The UI is okay with a keyboard and mouse, but it's really designed to be navigated with a controller from the moment you boot to the moment you finish your last one more round and then head to bed. Let's give it a shot. Oh, you got one of my favorite games on here. Let's go. No way. Is this the new Hori Steam controller?
Yep.
Definitely a controller. Ooh, these not even analog triggers? Oh, what a terrible shot.
Right to him.
I know, it sucked. Boom, take that. Boom, take that. Oh no. I think the most remarkable thing about this gaming experience is that there's absolutely nothing remarkable about it. This is exactly what it's like to play this game on Windows. Complete chaos. Okay, we got 10 seconds. One last rush. Here we go.
The game itself has complete chaos, I guess, but the difference between it actually should be described as remarkable because this is a machine that is running an operating system that is playing games not made for that operating system. That's remarkable. The amount of effort and stuff they've put on here is just so cool and so impressive because you're running an operating system for games that were not made to run on it, and it still works, and you can't notice a difference. Like, that's awesome. That is remarkable, in my opinion.
It's such a seamless experience. It's kind of mind-blowing to me. Like, I know SteamOS has been out for years now at this point, but the fact that this just works so flawlessly, so effortlessly is mind-blowing to me.
So that's funny because he's saying that it's mind-blowing to him, but previously it was not remarkable. So, but I think that's just like thinking about like, yes, it is mind-blowing because it's such a smooth experience and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I just thought that was kind of funny.
Awful. Well, SteamOS won't make you a better gamer, that's for sure. All right, let's play something else. Installed, what do we got? Hey, how about some Vampire Survivors? Play some casual games. I gotta set this up in my living room.
Never played this game.
Like,
no idea.
I have a Windows install that has Steam on it and is configured to launch Steam in big picture mode every time I turn it on, but I never bother with it because it's Windows and it's just like stupid and tedious and Windows Update and just like, it's not a console-like experience, and that's ultimately what you want in the living room. You don't want to get up and go find your stupid mouse and keyboard.
Okay, so I agree. He's talking about how the experience with the SteamOS and the Steam Deck is a much better experience. I would argue just getting a Steam Deck is a better experience because you just get one and plug it into your monitor, or you got to power it, of course. But the fact that you can do that is great. So that's much better.
Like, you can use a mouse and keyboard. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But you don't have to. You can just be ready to go. That's the SteamOS experience, and I'm loving this. What about all the just like special like Steam Decky stuff, like hardware monitor and stuff like that? Like, can we do any of that? What button is that?
The buttons on that controller, actually. It's all there.
Okay, that's kind of cool.
If you don't have a Steam controller,
Yeah.
Xbox button and A will bring that up.
Okay. It's Xbox button and A.
Yeah.
All right.
Cool.
Hey, cool. Well, let's disable the frame limit. What do we have any of that for? Performance overlay level. Oh, cool. So that's just that like 60 FPS counter that we've got.
Yeah, the normal counter thing you would get in Steam Deck.
And, we can enable HDR. I wonder if it's going to work though. We can try it in Doom Eternal. Let's try it in Doom Eternal. Mm-hmm. Why does it not look that HDR-y?
It's just
because the game's not in HDR.
Okay.
All right. Well, that'll help. Cool. Let's go with Ultra and no ray tracing.
That's probably a better bet.
Valve has done some work on getting HDR to work in Linux with the Steam Deck OLED. What I don't know is how well it's going to work on a TV.
Valve has done a lot of work for HDR, but HDR support is also not just a Valve thing. It's a lot of companies involved in trying to make HDR better on Linux. Red Hat, Codeweavers, all sorts of stuff. So what Valve is doing is great that they are participating in that. But I just wanted to point out it's a lot of companies involved in this, because even those you wouldn't think there would be, like an enterprise company like Red Hat, is also interested in making HDR better.
Not the brightest HDR TV, so maybe not our best case scenario for testing. In fact, honestly, it looks not great. I do wonder how much of it is the TV though. But everything thinks it's HDR. Maybe this is one area where there's a little bit of room for improvement here. Hey,
how could you say this might be one area where there's a little bit room for improvement when your testing experience and your testing environment has one you acknowledged is not a great component part of the HDR? You're saying that the TV doesn't have good HDR. So why even have a comment about the HDR? Just say like, oh, okay, well, we don't really know because the TV is not the greatest, so we're not really going to make a judgment call. But instead, you're saying that they might have room for improvement. You don't know because you're using it on not a great TV to do it on. So
The game's running great though, getting 163 FPS. And HDR is something where the Xbox and the PlayStation are going to give you a just works experience.
on the same TV, have you tested that? Who knows?
Then again, like I said before, I don't know how much of the problem is just the fact that this TV is not very good. The bottom line is that for living room gaming, most of what I would need is here. The 8BitDo controller we tried worked out of the box with its dongle, or failing that, any modern wired or Bluetooth controller should pick up without too much trouble. And I didn't have any issues with networking or sound, though your mileage may vary there a little bit, like I mentioned before. I would say that one glaring problem is that games launch at the Steam Deck's native 1280 by 800 resolution, but this can be fixed by manually setting the system resolution in the settings, and then games should pick that up.
I mean, that's an interesting point that it only launches at the native resolution. That makes sense because probably it's assuming that you're using a Steam Deck, as we've already established. So the first monitor it sees is assuming that it's a Steam Deck. And then when you add an extra monitor, that's when it activates the stuff. Because when you do plug in a TV, it knows that it's not the Steam Deck and doesn't force it to be that. And it asks you what you want to connect it to. And it detects what kind of resolution you have and that sort of stuff. So it doesn't do that by default in general when you have external monitor or a TV. But it does, I suppose, do it because of the fact that it's assuming that the first one it sees is the Steam Deck screen, which makes sense.
The bottom line is that for living room gaming, most of what I would need is here.
For living room gaming, so it's a console video now, but they're also talking about doing the desktop.
Between Proton and native Linux versions of games, there's a huge library now. Like, man, compared to the last time we did a gaming on Linux video, there's an enormous...
So I smiled here when he showed this screenshot because this is Apex Legends and also Grand Theft Auto 5. Which technically Grand Theft Auto 5 still works, but GTA Online does not work due to the anti-cheat stuff. So I kind of smile when they show that.
There's an enormous library of games that just work now. And while there have been some regressions, notably for online competitive titles where the developers don't want to maintain their anti-cheat on Linux, game compatibility has mostly been growing steadily.
There is a little bit of regression because of these companies. And it's not because that the platform can't do it, that SteamOS can't play these games. It's that they're not putting in the effort to make the anti-cheat work on Linux because they don't care about Linux. And I'm not saying that they should care about Linux because it's up to the company. If they don't want to make it work on the Steam Deck, they don't want to make it work on Linux gaming. I mean, that's a bummer, but it's their right to choose that, obviously. But at the same time, it's a very lame loser approach. Like, hey, we can't make this work on Linux well for us, so we're just going to abandon it. Like, come on. A little bit of effort. It goes a long way, as they say.
I think with the right hardware, I'm pretty much ready to say that building a SteamOS game console for your living room is pretty awesome. However, I can totally see why Valve has held off on saying the same.
I understand why Valve wouldn't say this because that means if they say that, then people are going to expect support and all this other stuff, and they don't want to deal with that, so they're not going to say that. And I think that the experience for most people, if they have the hardware that's going to work, would be fine if they're making like a living room console thing. And then he says that
I can totally see why Valve has held off on saying the same. Most gamers demand more than just my Steam game works. And there are some essential tools that can't simply be added from inside game mode, like Discord and alternate game stores like GOG and Battle.net.
Okay, Discord, I'll give you that. There's more to it than that. But why would alternate game stores be a factor? You're talking about, you're talking about doing a console and living room gaming, and that's basically a console. So you wouldn't need external stores to be available on a PlayStation or an Xbox. So why do you need it to be on the Steam Deck or the SteamOS? It's a console system, and you're talking about doing a console system. The Discord thing, that is arguably a valid point because people would want to use Discord. But they could also do that on their phone, so you don't really have to have that either for a console effect. I don't know, but it just seems like there's a lot of like gamers who are going to want a console experience. The games just working would be enough. If they want to have a full desktop experience or a laptop experience that also has gaming, that's a different situation entirely.
And, hey, this is a PC, right? What if I need to get some actual work done? How is desktop mode coming along?
So now it's a completely different video. As a console, it's great, which is what the SteamOS system is made for. As a PC, probably not, because there's going to be a lot of things it's not made to do.
Using the mouse and keyboard that I've got right here. Power and switch to desktop. That was quick. It looks like pretty much any other Linux desktop. Although it isn't quite. SteamOS 3 is what's known as an immutable operating system. If you already know what that means and you have strong feelings about it, SteamOS is probably not meant for you. If you don't know what that means, the oversimplified TLDR is, it means you can't screw it up too badly because it locks down critical system components and it will reset itself when you reboot. That doesn't mean...
That's not true. It locks down system components. Most of that's true. The reboot, making it reset itself, that's not what happens. It resets itself on updates. Oh, there's a pinned message. I hope that they updated that. Linus incorrectly describes how its systems... Okay, so they addressed that in the pinned comment. But also, it's not really an immutable system because technically the term immutable has sort of garnered improper usage. What immutable means is that you're not allowed, like it's not possible to make changes. And it is possible to make changes in SteamOS. There's a dev mode that's in the SteamOS. You can break it for sure. That's why the recovery image exists, because you can break it. It's not technically an immutable because that term means you cannot change anything at all, and it's just not possible. But this is more like an atomic system that you can have some modifications, but it still has a resetting function at some point. Immutable systems are cool for some use cases. Most use cases, no, more like an atomic style is better. But I would kind of go with something like Bazite or something else that's Fedora atomic related, because those are a pretty solid experience. There's a lot of effort being put on the atomic side for Fedora. So I think that there's a lot of potential there. And that's one of the reasons why Bazite is a cool option.
That doesn't mean you can't install software. It just means that you're effectively limited to what's available in their Flatpak-based Discover Software Center.
I mean, you're not really limited to those. Those are actually fine. The FlatHub is really good. The FlatHub is good. There's a lot of great apps in there. Most apps that you want are going to be in there, so you're pretty much fine for the for Discord, for example. They mentioned Discord earlier. You can get it as a Flatpak just fine, and the experience will not be much different at all. There also you have, I think maybe you'd have the ability to do app images because app images are not installed. They're run in from like the wherever folder you put them. But they might not have like the back-end stuff available on SteamOS because, it's not made for that purpose. So it's possible that those might not work. But there is the other option of DistroBox, which allows you to install effectively any software from any distro inside of a containerized approach. In a way, you can do anything, but that's a little bit more complicated to set up than just using Flatpak. So in my recommendation would be just like stick with Flatpaks. And that also applies to regular Linux distros. Just use Flatpaks on them as well if you can. Not necessarily everything's going to be great on a Flatpak, but most things are.
These Flatpaks might not be as efficient as if you installed VA Package Manager, but what it shows is that Valve learned very well from their community's love of, hey, how do I fix X in Counter-Strike?
First, I don't know what that means. I don't play Counter-Strike, so I would assume that means close the application like Alt F10 or Alt F4 would do. So I assume F10 is basically the same kind of thing. But I don't agree with the idea that Flatpaks are less efficient. Depending on what the app is, they're just fine. Yes, obviously you wouldn't want to play gaming necessarily inside of a Flatpak because you're putting a little bit of overhead into it. So Steam itself inside of the package, like regular traditional packages, might be better. Or maybe some kind of intense rendering might be better in the traditional packages. But for the most part, I think Flatpaks are a fine experience. And efficiency-wise as well. It should be fine for most things.
They've made SteamOS pretty hard to bung up too badly, because think about
That's
it.
true.
Realistically, poor Joey would almost certainly fall for the old RMRF asterisk trick at least once.
Well, I mean, you could still do that if you wanted to by turning on dev mode and doing all that. So you shouldn't, obviously. And also the RMRF thing, unless there's like a lot of more to it. It's not just asterisks. You actually have to have like a no preserve root tag on it and all this other stuff to make that function. But yes, it is something you can do in a Linux system. And there are people who are jerks who will say that to beginners. But that's more of like the trolling aspect of beginners is a shame. But yeah, it is great that Valve is considering that, and that's why they went with an atomic approach. But you could still technically do it if you wanted to. I don't know why you would want to, but yeah, the amount of steps it would take to get to that level would probably break a troll.
To be clear, there are ways outside of their all applications list here to install software. We even found this script on GitHub that allows us to install dozens of non-Steam stores. But
Well,
for the
don't do
Joeys out
that.
there, here's a standard disclaimer about running scripts that you find on the internet all willy-nilly. I'd recommend that you stick to the software center. The question is, if you do that, can you get any real work done here?
Okay, so now it's a work machine. So it was a desktop thing. Now it's a work machine. But I agree. Just stick to the Flatpaks. You don't need to do the other stuff. There's other stuff you can do, but you don't need to for the most part, especially if you're using it for its intended purpose of being a console.
Our browsers, internet, there. Okay, web browsers. Wolf, Vivaldi, Brave, just the Chromium web browser. Man, there's a ton of options here. This is great. And if you consider how much of it you do in a web browser these days, there's a good chance that we can get a lot of what we need to do done. What about Discord though? We mentioned Discord earlier.
Yep.
Discord, hey, there it is. 4 stars, boom, install. Shameless plug for the LTT Commuter backpack. We've got a lot more information available on it now, but in a nutshell, great backpack.
$150 for a backpack is not that outrageous if you go into like the people who are like into hiking and all that sort of stuff. They have like specific style backpacks. It is quite a lot though. I'm not endorsing this whatsoever. I've never tried it, but that price is not that outlandish because I've seen backpacks for 500 plus, and I don't know how anyone could justify that. But yeah. Anyway, let's moving on.
Oh, dude!
Oh no, we've lost them forever.
Space Cadet Pinball's in here. Here we go, here we go, here we go.
I didn't know
Here we
that.
go, let's go. Bah! Really? Bah! Come on! Come on! Oh, come on!
And Linus is loud.
Coming back to Discord, realistically, if you want to be able to use it while you're in game mode, you need to add it as a non-Steam app in desktop mode first. It's not a big deal, but it is the kind of thing that could trip up a less informed user. You can also do that with other apps, like non-Steam games and browsers. A browser can really come in handy over time in game mode. Now, of course, it is worth noting that since you're not concerned about conserving battery life and squeezing every last drop of performance out of mobile hardware, you don't actually need to go back to game mode at all.
Yeah.
Steam works just fine here on the desktop. And as much as I love touchpads and joysticks,
it also works just fine. It works just fine in any Linux distro. You can just install Steam on whatever and it'll be fine.
sometimes a keyboard and mouse is just plain a better way to use a computer. With standard peripherals, I can happily use my browser and apps just like I would on Windows, macOS, or any other Linux. The /home folder is persistent, so you don't have to worry about losing your files when you reboot. It just resets the system files so that the turn it off and turn it back on really does work to fix most things. And
no, it doesn't.
other than that, it pretty much just works like I would expect a computer to work. Pretty much. We did run into a funny scenario a little while ago. We were trying to get an old printer working with generic drivers, and I had a brainstorm that went, oh man, Linux! I bet Linux will work. Well, I'll just grab a Steam Deck. That already has Linux on it, and yeah. That's when I learned that SteamOS does not include support for printers out of the box, and you might come across similar gotchas over time. Let's see if they've added it. No, they have not.
So technically, it was added many months ago, but it was added in a way that's where the software is there to support it, but it's not running. So you have to enable, you run a systemd command in order to enable printing. So you could do it. I don't know why you would want to, but Linux probably would support whatever printer you're talking about. It would need to be like a Linux laptop rather than the Steam Deck. And you could technically do it here in now, but I don't know why that would be necessary for a game console.
So SteamOS, it's pretty great right now, but it's clear that there's a bit of work to be done. So what about those rumors we were talking about? Could new Steam machines be announced and released at any time? Absolutely. And I think we're due. Valve has spent years getting SteamOS to the point where it's at. They've made some hard decisions along the way, but overall, it works great on the right hardware and it keeps getting better. And the playable game library is huge now with no signs of slowing down. With that said, is SteamOS 3 ready to dethrone Windows? Not yet. There's enough.
Or is it even trying to? That's another question. So I think that it's fantastic for the console experience that it's made for. And if some point it could try to dethrone Windows, maybe. But right now it clearly is not even trying to do that. I mean, the fact that it only runs on certain types of hardware, specifically for that hardware that the Steam Deck happens to be using, it's clear that it is not made to be competing with Windows, at least not at this moment. Maybe someday, but definitely not now.
Prickly edges that keep it from being a totally smooth experience.
What are those?
And you can make the argument that Windows has a lot of prickly edges too, but the difference is that so many more people know how to troubleshoot it.
I don't think that that's necessarily true, because they probably have more prickly edges because there are so many more things that can go wrong on Windows. Just because there's so many more things that are made for Windows doesn't necessarily mean that it's optimized in any way. But I think that there is a truth to the idea that a lot of people are used to it, but I don't think they know how to handle it. I think that they just go through the same tutorials that we would find online explaining how to do it. Then you just go through the process of doing it. I don't think that means that they know how to. I just think that they know how to search online for tutorials to fix something. But you can also apply that to Linux, even SteamOS, whatever, but pretty much any operating system, actually.
Here's what I'd say is on Valve's to-do list. They need a simple installer, they need out-of-the-box support for a lot more hardware, and just one or two more passes of spit and polish. Also printer support. I do believe that they're going to get there though, especially if Microsoft decides they want to risk their market share by forcing a store on everyone, or if they keep making unreasonable hardware demands. Now I think all that's left is to unreasonably demand that you hear this message from our sponsor.
I think it's possible that Valve could make a cool desktop experience, and I think that the notes that they put in there are correct. They should make those kinds of things if they wanted to. The question is more of do they want to? I think it would be fantastic if Valve actually made a desktop operating system that it's using SteamOS and all that sort of stuff, because then that means they have to support a bunch of other hardware. They have to provide support for users and all this other stuff. I don't think that they are going to anytime soon because of the amount of expectation that's applied to them, and they don't want to have to deal with that just yet. I think they're kind of branching off into the whole CES stuff that's supposed to happen with Lenovo, and the brand guidelines of using SteamOS suggests that there are definitely going to be some competitor handhelds that are going to have SteamOS, and it also maybe implies that Steam machines might come back in a console form, which would be very cool, but I don't think that would suggest that desktop version of SteamOS is coming anytime soon. Maybe at some point, but not soon. Let me know what you think in the comments below about the video itself. Also, my reactions in this video. Should I keep making reaction videos? Let me know. Also, if you're curious about the previous reaction videos, having more data to decide whether I should keep doing it, you can check out this video here, which is the first of the installment for the Linus Tech Tips daily driver challenge that they did many years ago. I don't think I've done many other reaction videos. This was the first one, I'm pretty sure. So this will also link you to the rest of them. I'm not sure how many I did of those either, but